budget message, we got a summary budget
Okay.
that was the summary of everything that was in our book. And so these are the changes from the original.
So
Okay.
the last column is more the ones from the
The
budget book that
change,
you got.
yeah, the change is, it's that, the last one is the change from original. So that,
This is the first.
there's a column that says original FY17 town administrator, which is the original summary budget. And it's in between the FY17 requests and final.
Right, okay,
So most of those are salary adjustments.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so there's like 10,296
Right, and that-
town
that-
administrator salaries.
And that puts the part-time secretary back in.
Then there was $5,028 in the finance department salaries.
That's the IT person's salary, plus we had a shift of people during the year, so that helps
Okay.
that out.
Is that the directors?
Right, he put, at some point, we had people putting in their own in, at some point, we were putting some in, and
Right.
somehow his was not his salary, so.
Okay.
And then with the bumps that we had from the layoffs, we had bumping from one department to another, or transfers.
It
That,
still makes the total salary increase from last year to this year is 1.9%, so it's
Right.
not.
Yeah.
It's just, these are the things that are different. The town clerk salaries went down $1,570.
that's again because of bringing, even though it was a 19-hour-a-week position, the person who transferred over was at a lesser grade, at a lesser step, not a lesser grade, than the person who left.
Conservation salaries, up 9,
I've just got to assume that that was an error of somebody plugging it in and somebody else plugging it in.
What happened was a lot of times people looked and they were told to do like 2.5% of a salary, but if they just looked at their budget and possibly their budget was wrong from the year before, then they do 2.5%. I just tried to go through and make it more realistic to
so
what.
I know that you went through and did some salary adjustments to
Yeah.
make
Some
things
went up, some
more
went down.
really
Yeah.
closer to what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and the same in the planning department, the salary was higher than it should have been when it was first plugged in, and it was brought back down to where it belongs in the step and time plan.
Planning department salaries down 500. Engineering department salaries down 1,021. Facility salaries up 606. So the total general change was 13,159 for general government.
So what happened in the engineering department? Do you remember?
It was just plugged in wrong.
Okay.
That was Michael.
In public safety, the inspections department salaries are down $3,043.
I have no idea.
And then we're doing 2.5%.
Emergency preparedness down 176,000.
Thought we were in the good, the bad, and the ugly there for a minute.
And Department of Natural Resources salaries up 7,054.
Part of that was to bring, there were a number of employees at DNR for seasonal that wouldn't have been at the minimum wage, that's part of it.
Oh, minimum
Okay.
wage, okay.
And then the other was just people putting in a figure that didn't match up to the figure that should have been put in by the finance.
So that net increase was 3,835. School department, Bourne Schools Department, the increase 43,164, which is what they brought to us when they came and talked to us.
That was when
What's-
the superintendent spoke with us, with the chair of the school committee. There was a possibility of a variation of a little bit. And it was within the scope of what he said it would happen. So it's right within the figures we were expecting. Just came in after the first printing.
Board of Health up 1,060 for salaries. Council on Aging up 1,552 for salaries. Memorial Community Building down 1,161 for salaries. For the net human services, 1,451 for salaries, all the same kind of adjustment. Excuse me, library salary 6,250 up. I thought that was gonna be like 10,000, is it?
Well, it was, and then the offset of the, having to bring them down to net to about that. So,
The offset of what was it?
because when they were told to do it, they did a straight, like, across the board, which that's not,
And the new person they're bringing in will be at a step
Step
one
lower,
instead of
yeah.
a higher step.
Okay.
Okay. Does this influence the amount of funding that needs to be done for certification, which they were $10,000 short for the certification funding? So will that influence that certification?
that I don't.
He hasn't indicated that, and he was the one that, so, if it does, and we have to make an adjustment at the special, we can do that, the special in October, but,
Okay.
There's a lot of worry about in my group
Yeah.
of people anyway, about the decertification.
no, the library will be back up to, I believe, the 50 hours once this person we've already hired. So they should be starting up at the 50 hours very soon. And if they haven't already, but,
Well, there's just the two pieces of it. There's the 50 hours, which they can do.
Right,
but
and then
there's
there's-
also the funding,
so much percent toward
Right.
books or whatever, so.
well, and total spending
Yeah.
as a percentage, so, okay. And Bourne Recreation, salary down 1,599. Was that a reduction or more going to revolving?
No, just a
Just a-
reduction.
Culture and Recreation adjustment then was 4,651. Debt service down, debt service up 5,140. Oh, no. That's it, they added that whole thing. And then the grand total of changes was 71,400, most of which was, 43,000 was the schools.
Schools, right.
Okay. So is there any discussion in general on the budget recommendation?
I think it's been gone over sufficiently, really, the people that.
Okay. So the motion asks for 59,343,453, which is as reflected in the sources and uses. And
So I have a question about the library salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I may be wrong, and if I am, please correct me, but, wasn't, one of the library personnel recently let go?
But that person was brought back. The position was brought back when the funding went back in at the special town meeting. There was $35,000 that was placed back in for the half year. And then 70,000 and some change that's been put in for the full year in FY17. So that position it's a circulation assistant,
Yeah,
was brought back.
okay.
Okay? The difference in salary there is twofold. The $6,000 is twofold. One is some of the salaries had to be adjusted because they were plugged in incorrectly. And secondly, the new person coming on, the person who had the position, we did a callback, which we have to do under the union contracts, opted not to come back.
Okay.
So the new person coming in comes in at a lower step. It would be at a step 1 as opposed to perhaps a step 6 or 7.
Okay,
And that brought that down.
okay.
so the 6,250 is funding what the 10,000 was going to fund, but it has to do with the step and
And,
the higher.
Right.
Okay, the level. Any other questions or comments about the budget? Okay, so we want to have a motion to recommend that the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 3.
Also move. Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? It's unanimous. We're at 9 tonight, right? Yep. 9. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to go through the warrant articles, starting with the special town meeting. Article to appropriate the sum of $275,000 to supplement the FY16 DPW snow removal budget, and to meet this appropriation to transfer the sum of $94,000 to snow and ice salaries and $181,000 to snow and ice expenses from free cash. Any discussion on the motion?
Move approval.
Second. Any further discussion?
Is there enough in free cash to well cover that?
Yes, yes. In the, the way that the free cash was laid out in the Finance Committee report, based on the amount of free cash that we have received during this year, we had $1.1 million that we could spend for the budget. And even with that, which is actually in your warrant. Page 7. Page 7. But when you lay out the money, if you we had it at 200, originally it was 246,000, but using this at 246,000, if you look on page 12, you'd see that there was 2,002,754 in excess of the free cash policy, which would leave, if we used the 246,000 for the snow and ice, which would leave 1,001,377 to be used for the budget. And so we fall within free cash policy if we pay this deficit and use $892,000 for the budget. We still have $1 million of excess free
Right.
cash.
Thank you.
So I think it's, and a big part of that difference was the premium from the debt offsets as being money that we've already received. And so
Right.
we're counting money that we've already received, even though it hasn't been certified, as going into our free cash. But we're still okay in terms of use of certified free cash.
Correct.
Right?
And the 246 to the 275
Was that last storm where we couldn't
April
meet?
11th storm, right?
So I think between using the governor's budget numbers for our revenue and using the, going through what we had received as certified free cash, that I'm comfortable with doing this. My original concern about it is if we were going in excess of free cash. I was
Right.
concerned about trying to do it and then using too much free cash. But the way things have worked out, that's not happening, so I think we're good. Okay, any further discussion on the snow and ice deficit? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay, the next article to be discussed is Article 2, Elected Officials Compensation.
You want me to say a couple of things?
Sure.
Which I just learned, so. The moderator's salary went up 1.5%. The selectman's salary stayed the same. And the town clerk's salary went up 1.5%.
Okay.
I don't know what else you need to know.
No, we kind of discussed it. Most of these we discussed last
Okay.
week, so, so is there a motion to recommend approval of Article 2?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
So we have to copy down all the vote tallies. Or
No, I'm doing it. I'll update it and write it. I'll update it and send out a new thing, so we have all the votes.
so there's 9 of us here?
There are 9 tonight, yes. There was 8 last week, so.
And have
Okay.
the selectmen voted on this?
Tomorrow
Oh,
evening.
we have to watch.
They haven't voted on any of these, have they?
Not the specific articles, but
They
no,
voted to have the articles on the special,
Right.
on the town meeting, but they haven't voted their support
Correct.
of articles yet, right? Which is, I was thinking we should make another column and have their vote.
I've said that for years.
We should. Never
Well,
did
you know,
that.
I might just do that. I was thinking that,
Good idea.
and then maybe we could print it with the motions for the town meeting.
They've just gotta get it done early, that's all.
They voted tomorrow. We could do TBD if they hadn't voted anything.
Okay.
Okay, all right, next item is Article 4, which is the sewer budget. Is there any further discussion on the sewer budget?
Move approval. I got a question.
Well, let's have a second and then we can have discussion,
I'll second it.
okay? So now we'll have discussion on the motion.
Maybe I remember wrong, please correct me, but it seems to me that the receipts from the sewer department, do they go into a revolving fund?
And enterprise
Enterprise
fund.
fund.
The sewer
Enterprise
department
fund.
is an enterprise fund run separately
So
from
the
the town.
million that gets collected can actually be used for expenses?
Only for sewer expenses,
No, that's fine, so to cover these things.
yes,
All right, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
And Chair,
yes.
and just so that it's clear, all the revenues are user fees.
Yes,
It's not a dime of taxpayer,
Correct.
correct.
just so that's out there for people.
Isn't that nice?
That's why it's voted separately. Okay, so is there any further discussion on the sewer department budget?
Just had a question for my own, in the expenses, 704,000, included in that, I believe, is a spike in debt service, which I'm just wondering if you knew offhand what new debt service was incurred or
Oh,
will
for
be
the sewer
incurred.
department?
Yeah,
They bought some pumps and panels, and he's been doing that like every, I think, year for the last couple of years, so that's about it.
Was that part of the bonding that
Yeah,
happened?
yeah.
So we did that big
Yeah,
bonding that
all
brought
right.
all the
Yeah.
debt service up,
All right.
and so that was part of that big bonding. And so-
yeah, all right.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 4?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? It's unanimous. Next article is Article 5. Move that the town vote to appropriate any sums of money received from Chapter 90. Move approval.
Second,
Is there any discussion on this motion?
Do we know the amount? Or no, it's just-
It'll be about the same as last year. It'll be somewhere in the $600,000
Okay.
range. There's 200 million that's been so far approved for FY '17. The budget's not done, they're going into budget discussions, House and Senate, but,
George?
I don't know everything about the formula, but is that based on about 100 miles of accepted roads?
it's based on road miles and other factors.
Yeah,
But, yeah, figure about 90 some odd roads miles of town-owned roads. Not town-maintained roads, but town-owned roads.
Thank you.
Accepted. Okay, is there any further discussion on recommendation on Article 5? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous? Article 6 is the reserve fund to raise and appropriate the sum of $290,000 for the reserve fund. Any discussion?
Move approval.
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Article 7 is the ISWIM budget. $8,744,161. $2,030,312 for salaries and wages, $5,713, $5,713,849 for expenses, $20,000 for the reserve fund, and $800,000 for the host community fee.
200,000.
200,000. 200,000 for the reserve fund, 800,000 for the host community fee. I'm glad I'm not doing motions tonight on the floor. $1,922,744 to be transferred to the general fund to offset indirect expenses. And the total appropriation of $10,666,905 to be raised from receipts of the ISWEB Enterprise Fund.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion on this motion? One thing I had a question about, that someone had emailed me about was the fact there's a difference between the expected revenue and then the expenses. And one of the things that, happens with ISWEM is that all of their set-asides for closure and post-closure are not expenses, and they have to be paid for and transferred out of revenues above the expenses, so that's,
The
They're not-
post closures, we take them out, directly out of retained earnings. So, every March, I do a transfer out of out of their retained earnings and put it into the other set-asides
but there
for
needs
that.
to be profit to go into retained earnings in order to be able to make that transfer each year.
Right, you don't want to draw your retained earnings
Yes.
down. Knowing each phase has a certain,
Right.
calculation that,
Yes,
They send
so
over,
it's
yeah.
important that it is, there is a profit
Covered.
in excess of expenses to cover
Yeah.
needed obligations.
Which means our increasing reliance on the host community fee to support the general operating budget is a quandary we need to resolve.
But our reliance on the host community fee has been pretty stable the last couple of years. And our reliance on the host community fee as compared to 10 years ago is down exponentially.
Well, we had set a goal for ourselves to get down to $300,000 or less. And we were getting very close. And we've continued to increase since then,
little.
so.
But we've
But you're
also
right.
extended the
Yeah.
life of the landfill. I mean, we purchased
True.
land and extended the life of the landfill, and they're looking at things that will
Yeah.
create ongoing revenue. So I think you're right, that it's something that we have to monitor.
Yeah, it's something that we look at every,
Those businesses need to support the level we are becoming accustomed to.
well, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that although we run a very good operation, we run a great operation. If for some reason there's a hiccup there, or DEP changes regulations without a lot of notice, or those types of things, we have to be, we don't want to have, which is what I said when I came here, you don't want to have the $2.5 million hiccup on the town side if something needs to happen over at the landfill that makes them not available for any period of time.
Yeah.
So you're right, and we continue to strive to that.
Might want to even consider looking at non-recurring expenses if you're starting to wean it down, like a capital expenditure of some sort. Then if it goes away, you're not depending on operating revenue for the town.
That's a good idea, with the understanding that then you might reduce your free cash allocation toward capital to try, as the offset to that as well.
Right.
So,
Good ideas. Okay, any further discussion on Article 7? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Article 8, revolving funds. This article is, I believe, contingent on the passage of Article 17. We have to vote Article 17 first, correct?
correct.
Which we have already voted to support Article 17 last week. So, but we all note that at the pre-town meeting. Is there any discussion on the revolving fund article? Is there a motion to support, recommend approval of Article 8?
Move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Article 9 is the capital outlay plan expenditures, which is $4,937,538. It includes everything in the capital plan that has been discussed with some minor changes that I reviewed last week. With $300,000 of the projects in the plan to be covered by the CPA for the Monument Beach ramp.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion on the capital plan? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Article 10 is committee reports. Is there a motion to recommend that we hear reports of committees?
We voted that last
We
week.
voted that way.
Yep, you're right.
It was
Oh, now we're
eight.
skipping, okay.
Yeah.
Article 18. Okay. Moving right along. To vote the sum of $150,000 for the purpose of funding the town's accrued contractual
Oh, right.
compensated absences, and to meet this appropriation, transfer the sum of $150,000 from free cash.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Madam Chair, do you need to go back and vote 15?
No, we voted it last week. It was a CPA article. We voted all the CPA articles last week.
All right.
I only had 300,000, he didn't know what it was from, so it's actually open space revenues, so I didn't know how you
Oh,
voted
yeah, we said as recommended.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
We voted it as
Okay.
recommended.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Open space as opposed to recreation?
yeah, so it's
Okay.
open
It's
space.
just open space
Yeah, I
revenues.
think it said that, and I think we just were, I think there was something about that.
Okay, we just
And we
wanted to be
weren't
sure.
sure, but, yeah, okay. Because I think it was actually in the article. Because it was the Open Space Committee and the Community Preservation Committee, so that makes sense, okay. Okay, Article 20. I mean, unless people want to revote, but I think we kind of covered that, however, the funding was
I
recommended.
just,
Did we do 18?
What? On Article,
No, we voted 18?
we voted 18, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
900. Is that a pleasure of the committee? Do you want to go back and vote 15, or think we're good? I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Article 20 Move the town appropriate the sum of $50,234.54 for the purposes of accepting proceeds from insurance recovery fund for the loss of the community building and to
Oh,
transfer.
shoot, it's not the community building.
Yeah, for
the
the,
community.
yeah,
Because
school. Yes, could we read these things? Yes,
It's the school.
What's up there, but
Yeah.
at the Bourne Middle School.
Well, since it was the Bourne Middle School, I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on accepting insurance proceeds? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, we need a motion. Oh, no, wait, so it's that time. Okay, all in favor, aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, 21's been voted. Article 22, OPEB.
Oh, you did, yeah, that's right, you did 21 at 900,000, that's right.
We increased it.
Yeah.
Yes, nice try.
Hit me on this though.
Okay, Article 22. So what are we gonna do about the OPEB? Are we gonna take it all from free cash, or you gonna make any kind of allocation, or do you wanna?
I honestly don't, I feel uncomfortable trying to just pick a figure, but I mean, if you wanted to do it like, that's up to, I'm gonna leave that be to Tom's discretion if he
I
wants to.
I would prefer that we'd put this toward the towns in a general article, do the actuarial study that we need to do, and then come up with an appropriate figure that may go back a year or two.
Okay, I actually think that's probably a pretty good idea, but I would really like to have that for the fall.
That's
So
what I-
That's, yeah.
You know, so that for the fall, we have an actuarial discussion of the liability of the enterprise funds, the liability of ISOM, the liability of sewer, the liability of the town, and then we start appropriating appropriate money, especially for ISWIM, to make sure that that liability is fully funded when it closes. So we'll
It's
do
not
that.
something that I can figure out, because, and you have to go back to the retirees and everything. so-
But I think it's not something we've asked them to do before, and I think it's about, I think that would be.
So just so that the finance committee is aware, when the squeal comes from ISWIM, when we contact Siegel, who does this, it will come from their other contracted services line for now,
Okay,
okay?
well, primary purpose is to, identify their liability
Right.
as an enterprise.
He's not aware of this yet, and he can't see unless he's watching us remotely, but that's where it will have to come from.
Okay,
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
yes, Brian.
I know we put into this, I think, 2 years ago. Has it been 1 year so far that we've missed, or is this the second year?
Well, I think we missed last year, but they're still putting money in this year, so we won't miss any this year. Are you talking ISWIM?
Oh,
No,
no,
I'm talking
OPEB.
about this OPEB thing.
We-
When we first
So only 1 year.
started calculating the liability, we put in 200. I believe it was 2 years ago.
Correct, we did not put money in
Pretty sure we
last,
skipped last year,
right.
and then the question is, do we want to skip this year, or what do we want to do?
We put more in even before the year before, so it goes back 2 or 3 years that we've put money
Right.
in.
The
Yeah.
town has set aside $578,631 in the
Oh, so
trust
that much in
fund.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah, for this purpose.
I thought it was
So
just 200.
we've had a couple times when we've put in money, and so this would bring it up to 778,000 plus whatever interest is earned in it, actually into the trust
Like
fund.
a drop in the bucket
Mm.
from what
Well,
we're
what's
doing.
the
No, I would put it-
liability?
yeah.
10
70
or
million?
something?
I'd put
Yeah.
$1 a year in.
There's,
to say we
when,
are.
what we should probably do if we have a time, they also have other options of funding these, and maybe possibly bringing that discussion aboard too. Other ways to do that, to get the whole thing funded and joining in with these other people that are doing it. that
There's
way.
there's consortium funding, there's,
Well, we can have that as
Yeah.
part of, I mean, I think this is a good meeting topic for us to have an off-budget cycle on how to deal with it, because it's a big topic. I mean, we do pay for it as we go, and then we should look at how are we actually funding our, part of our health insurance, like what are the options of funding our health insurance and how does that fit into the OPEB too? Big question. Okay. So, on the question of Article 22, a motion to recommend approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on Article 22?
Just, this is, you said this would be funded by ISWIM and, you know, their own,
Their portion, their
portion
piece
of
of it.
is there, does Siegel offer any, like, I call it volume discounts for, if other municipalities are asking for the same? I mean, in other words, I'm assuming all the
Well,
municipalities are asking for this at some point in time.
We have a very good agreement through the county with Siegel on a regular actuarial piece, retirement piece and things like that. I think it's $4,000 last year.
Could be.
Yeah, it's a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great deal. This would be separate. There aren't many that have, there are some that have enterprise funds, but not like this. You know.
Do the ISWIM retirement benefits, pension contribution, is that part of the indirect costs?
What
Is
we,
the pension,
So,
we
the
take, yes.
pension contribution, so, I mean, I think one of the things that we should look at is like, what is actually in the 1,900,000 something of that, we're kind of, you know, what is the calculation of the indirect costs? So that we make sure we're covering everything.
it covers, it takes their pension, takes all their health insurance, workman's comp.
Well, we don't pay
Yeah.
dental, but, yeah, the dental,
Mhm.
yeah,
The group insurance.
yeah.
Yeah.
Vehicles.
No.
No.
Anything more, the retirement too, their share of retirement.
Yep. This would just be adding that. But this, the health insurance, the OPEB calculation, is that, sort of an add-on to the general pension calculation? I mean, it's the same people that you're calculating for, you're just making a different calculation, so
Mhm.
they should be actually doing it for our indirect costs for that. Doesn't seem like it's a lot of extra work, it's just adding that other calculation to the work that they're already doing for the pension.
Well, and it may be not, when we call them to say, can
Yeah.
you do this? It may be just extrapolating some numbers out
Yeah,
and going back, years on that, on the number of employees and who's here and who isn't, and what they were getting paid. It may not be that complicated, but
Right.
we need to broach it with them first.
yep, no, I think that's a good idea. Okay, so on the question of the recommendation on Article 22 for OPEB, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay. Article 23. Which is, repair resurface of Oak Ridge Drive, $110,000 to be paid back through betterment assessments to the abutters.
Okay.
Move approval?
Second.
Today? Okay.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? It's unanimous. Article 24 is $300,000 for the purpose of repairing and resurfacing Shaker Drive, Friendship Lane, Lancaster Lane, Canterbury Lane, Monument Beach, to be repaid to the town through betterments of the abutters.
Move approval?
Second.
Is there any discussion on Article 24? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay, so we don't have motions for the next things. so-
Correct.
Which are easement for Trowbridge Road, which I think we shall have to wait until we have a motion before we can vote that. Article 26, the bylaw finance committee membership.
What is that gonna be?
Well, what that does, what that does is it removes the requirement that at least one member from, the committee shall have one member from at least 5 of the town's 7 villages, namely Sagamore, Bourne, Buzzards Bay, Monument Beach, Pecasset, and Catawba, and 7 members at large. Removes that wording. So therefore, the wording that remains is, there shall be a finance committee consisting of 12 voters of the town, appointed by the moderator, none of whom shall hold any other town office. Town and Bourne employees, including school employees, shall not be eligible for appointment to or service on the finance committee as provided in section 2.9 of the town charter. And then then it would skip what was deleted, and then it would say the term of service for members of the committee shall be 3 years, the term of service for 4 members shall expire each year, and their successors shall be appointed by the moderator. No person shall be eligible for reappointment as a member of the finance committee unless he or she has attended at least 75% of all regular meetings duly called by the chair of the committee during his or her tenure. The committee shall annually submit an attendance report to the moderator.
And what is the reason for the change?
The reason for the change was I actually requested it last summer because we'd had an extended period of time when we did not have 12 members because the moderator was trying to get people in the right distribution among the villages. And it's very difficult for us when we're constituted as 12 voters. We have to have 7 for a quorum. And even if we're down to 10 members, we still have to have 7 for a quorum. And it can be a challenge when you don't have the 12 people to actually get the quorum. So this was one way to, and the bylaw committee unanimously approved it, to make it, and we've done this to make it easier to get people appointed to committees so that we can actually have a quorum.
I'm not
Full
challenging it, I
membership.
just wanted to know.
Yeah. George?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Just to have, it would be nice to have all villages represented, but on a finance committee, I don't think it's that important. These aren't governmental units, these are just villages, and not to have representation on the finance committee, from a village, really isn't that important. It'd be, be nice, but like I said, I don't think there should be a residency requirement to make it more difficult to get adequate membership on a committee. It's burdensome as it is, and this makes it that much more difficult to do. And like I said, there's no great benefit. There could be if there was some area of town that was, getting overlooked, but on the finance committee, I don't see that happening.
I also think having them televised means everyone can get access.
Right.
I think the original idea was that the person who was in the village would bring some of the ideas back to their neighbors and that kind of thing, which really doesn't happen. Because of the television, you can just
Mm.
Brian?
In my view, there's very few articles that are one village specific.
Correct.
Looking at tonight's, other than Article 24 that talks about blacktopping a few streets in Monument Beach, that's about the only one.
But those have
that I
gone
could
before
grab.
voters in
And-
those neighborhoods anyway, so they're
Right,
aware of
right,
it.
right.
So,
So I don't see a need.
yeah.
I think it was more from the idea that all the villages would be able to have the information. And that if you had it, if I recall anyway.
And I think it used to be more stringent.
Yes, it was.
We used to
fixed it
have one
once.
of one for everyone, and then we moved it down, but if you have 2 people that are, whose names, have put their names on to be on the finance committee, and they're not from the right villages, so they can't be appointed, and there's not a full complement on the committee, it
Exactly.
really doesn't make sense in this. And
Extra burden.
I mean, the moderator can try to keep that in consideration when he's making appointments, but not have it as an impediment, I think.
No, we went for a couple of years with only 11 people, in part because of this requirement.
Good idea.
Okay, so do we want to vote this or wait for the motion? Let's vote it.
Move approval.
Second.
Is any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, abstention? Article 27 is easement and parking license
Yeah,
agreement.
I've got to wait for Bob to get that to me. I don't,
Do we know if that's an easement that the town is giving them because we own the property and they need to use it for parking, or you don't know? Yeah, okay, so
Who
we'll
is it
wait.
in relation to?
the Cody school sale,
Oh, okay, because I'm doing it and I have no clue.
well, we'll have a better clue on Wednesday.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, clue me in.
Yeah.
Article
Duh.
28, you're not ready for that motion
No,
either?
and I'm not 100% sure that'll go forward at this meeting.
Okay. Article 29, amendments to the charter. So we don't have a motion yet, but I don't know if anyone wants to say anything about that the proposal on the charter that we heard last week. People are in favor of recommending the full thing, or whether they think that they're going to want to divide the question, and I'm open to comments.
Where is it? Did
I thought it was a pretty good airing on it last week.
Well, this is our
Right.
discussing our recommendation more. To me, one of the things that one of the things, it's in, the changes are, too, in the warrant, if you have it, I think.
You got a packet next week.
Yep.
Did you like the changes in the finance committee part? That was something I looked at.
Well, that seemed to be the hot topic last week, so. Now that everyone's had a time to think about it, I don't know I'm curious as to how people feel. I'm more concerned about it being a limitation,
Yeah,
because the person from the, West said, well, this is just leaving it up to you to decide. But I'm not sure that the wording leaves it up to the finance committee to decide. It seems more, this is what you could do, and
most articles have some sort of monetary thing attached to it, even though they don't say it. If it's somewhat, I think we could get around it. I think we should continue to do it all, because I think it's important to educate people. And, we start out not knowing what these articles are all about until someone explains it to us.
mm-hmm.
And then we discuss it. But other people who come to the town meeting do not have that opportunity. And I worry about people just not knowing. It shall be the duty to investigate all.
I agree, I don't think we should support that particular portion of the recommendation.
I'm not comfortable at all.
You're not, or you are?
With recommending that
Right.
portion.
I mean, I understand that there's the feeling of, well, we can do it, basically, we do whatever we want, right up until the point somebody objects to it.
Where does it
And-
say that we can do whatever we want?
It doesn't.
It doesn't,
Doesn't.
that's the problem. And therein lies the problem. I mean, we could certainly try we can come up with all kinds of rationalization of why it's
Yeah.
financial in nature, but at the end of the day, if we've got people who object, there's a process within the charter that takes care of when you object to what one of us does.
Right.
And do we really want to set ourselves up for that?
No.
No.
is
I
it
don't
the-
think so.
no,
It's
charter
us that
violation?
have to decide whether or not we're gonna discuss the article. So are we gonna have a vote on each one of the non-financial articles to see if we really wanna discuss it? Will that work?
I think the logistics of it become complicated. How can you vote whether or not to do something until you know what it's all about? And by the time you know what it's all about, Well, you might as well put that knowledge to good use and make a recommendation to town meeting.
That makes sense. Makes sense, Michelle.
So my recommendation would be that we leave the finance committee part of it as is.
So now, the question is, what are the
Do that.
mechanics of the motion that would be
Yeah.
made?
You could make a motion to amend by striking the proposed language and reverting to the language that's currently in the 2007 charter.
For section 2.9,
Right.
finance committee.
Correct.
That sounds like a good motion.
I'll move that one.
Who's doing the charter?
I'll second
No,
that.
I am.
Oh, of course.
Michelle is.
Yay!
I'm
It's
no
not your
fool.
journey.
I was getting a hot flash. You don't mind moving on.
You have a
We
motion and a
switched
second.
you, and it's you.
Already.
Wait a minute, which section is this in the warrant?
Okay, so
78?
is there any other section that people have a concern with? I mean, right now, if we were to have a motion now, the recommended approval of Article 29, as, with an amendment to the motion to strike the change, to delete the change in section 2.9, something like that. Would that get the, is there anything else that people have concern with?
And it just, and the word that it reverts back to. Does it automatically revert back? Do we have to put that in there?
No, because the action would be to add the wording, and so that if we don't add the wording, then
Okay.
it
Yeah,
reverts to
I
what it
just want to make
was.
sure we
Yes.
cross the Ts and dotted the
Yes.
Is.
Well, there was one other section.
Delete section
Isn't it
2.9?
the fire, police and fire
Oh, there were a
section?
couple minor changes,
Typo changes, yep.
yeah, that, we might include in that motion.
That was what, fire person,
Yeah, fire and police.
gender?
Yeah, and the,
Something to the police department.
yeah, wasn't it like the, last two sentences or something that's included in the fire department section?
And I think that comes, as I said last week, I believe that comes directly from the statute in the fire chief statute, which is much older, is a little more all-encompassing. Both chiefs have concurred with this. The police chief is fine. It was kind of a,
Well,
well, he
he's fine with
understands it.
no financial limitation.
wrote
I
it.
know we can,
That word.
yeah, but I know.
There's a typo on page 7, under section 4.1.
Wait a minute, are we gonna delete section 2.9?
Right, so right now, we're crafting a motion that would recommend approval of Article 29 with an amendment included in the motion, which I don't know if we can do that, but to strike the changes in 2.9 that would add wording regarding the finance committee.
I agree.
So there's a typo on page 7,
So
where,
let's try to, I'm gonna try to do this by the warrant too, so.
It would be on page 76 of your
Okay.
warrant,
of the warrant,
under 4.1 Plymouth County within, is that?
yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And then on the next page, on section 4.4,
page 77,
under
disability is,
section 4.4,
Right, the insertion of it is.
Oh, we gotta
Yeah.
go by this, yeah.
So 4.4,
disability is
Yeah.
greater.
You have to insert the
disability is greater than 10 business days.
Yeah.
And then the next page, section 4.4 continued. We had some discussion about the language that was used under item F. Keep the Board of Selectmen fully informed of all issues and potential problems. And when all was said and done, if I recall correctly, Judy recommended, well, why don't you just use the language that was in your reason? Who do we want to recommend?
Of all issues and problems that they need to address.
That's way too broad.
But to keep the,
Right.
To clarify the so instead, to clarify the administrator's obligation to keep the selectmen informed of all issues and problems that they need to address.
so it would be to keep the selectmen informed
Of all issues and problems.
of all issues and problems that they need to address, correct?
Right.
As opposed to potential. 'cause
That's the new F.
Right, potential becomes,
Yeah, it really just takes out potential. Right?
Right, it just says it better, too.
No, it
then-
doesn't.
it takes out
then
needs of
takes
the
out-
town too.
Potential or needs of the town
And make recommendations.
and make recommendations.
There will be times when something comes up, you won't be able to make a recommendation at that point.
So really, it's F, from the language that they provided, you retain, keep the Board of Selectmen fully informed of all issues and problems, and strike potential problems that they need to address.
All is, all.
Everything else gets struck.
Right. That sounds like much better sentence construction.
If there's a motion of the motions that are going before the town meeting, if it is the motion of the finance committee, can we sort of like take this opportunity to craft the motion and have it reviewed by town council? So that's the motion that's in that's passed out, as opposed to trying to amend a motion on the
Yes.
floor that's different than the motion that's there, as long as the Board of
Let me-
Selectmen
let
maybe
me-
concurs
With the
tomorrow?
chair's permission, I would email council now to let him know that. the
Yeah.
finance- all right.
And actually, I think instead of informed of all issues, it should be informed of issues
Yeah,
and problems
Right,
that they need to address.
right.
period, and we're not,
Right.
Period, yeah, I mean,
okay. Okay, to
So
keep the
then-
Board of Selectmen fully informed of issues and problems that they need to address. That's the wording,
Yeah.
Okay?
Keep it simple.
then you come to the next page, is when we have our, do we change the gender language, or do we leave it as is because it came from a general law?
Where are we now? Please.
Under the fire department section.
5.8.
Firefighter.
So there were actually two things that were discussed, was changing the word firemen to firefighters. And then the last sentence, in the expenditure of money, the chief of the fire department shall be subject to such further limitations as the town may from time to time prescribe. That sentence is not in the police department. And there was a discussion that it needed to be in the police department section.
Right.
So,
Would we recommend that amendment?
I also have another concern that, the police department, doesn't have the same verbiage that, the, police chief report to the town administrator from time to time, as the administrator may require. You know, I mean, it makes the, section seem that the police chief does not need to report to anyone. When in reality, all department heads need to report to the town administrator.
Agreed.
Well, if I might, the town administrator is the appointing authority for all police officers to control the chief of police. The police chief may, from time to time, make suitable regulations for the department and officers, subject to the approval of town administrator.
Okay.
That just says the police chief has the authority to appoint police officers, subject to your approval. It doesn't say that the chief of police needs to report to you.
I think she's making an important point,
Yeah.
because the whole government reports to
Exactly.
him. I mean, the whole.
Chain of
town.
command.
Yes.
And without that verbiage, the police chief doesn't need to report to anybody.
So, there's this whole, I mean, the thing that happens in the fire department, the chief of the fire department shall have full and absolute authority in the administration of the fire department, shall make all rules and regulations for its operation, shall report to the town administrator from time to time as the administrator may require, and shall annually report to the town the condition of the department and his recommendations thereon.
That doesn't sound to me like he's under the control of anybody.
The difference, I think, if I could.
Sure.
In one, it seems to say the chief of police may from time to time. And in the other one, it used the word shall, if I'm reading this right. I mean, there's a big difference between may and shall.
I want to make sure that we don't have them not report. I think they should report to the town
This-
administrator.
Absolutely.
This is our type form of government, the town administrative form of government. That's what we have.
Yes,
There's a-
although I do want to,
Organization chart.
I think that it is very clear in, this is the language in here mirrors statute that we already work under. This just codifies it more. I don't find this onerous or taking away the authority of the town administrator relative to day-to-day operation and budgetary control. Day-to-day operations for the police and fire chiefs fall under the police and fire chief, okay?
And that's fine, and I'm not saying
No.
that they shouldn't, and they should, absolutely they should. What I'm saying is that section 5.5-8, fire department, it says the fire chief needs to report to you from time to time upon your request. It doesn't say anywhere in section 5-7 that the police chief needs to report to you from time to time upon your request. Why does the fire chief need to report to you and not the police chief?
I missed that.
It's a big
I'm
And
difference.
then he
just saying
didn't
that
have
for
to follow
10
the funding
minutes.
either.
Yeah,
Well, so those are those are the two there's,
And it also says, let's see, shall report to the, and shall annually report to the town the condition of the department with his recommendations thereon. Does that also say that in section 5-7?
no, the statutory language is different in the two.
but
It doesn't matter, I understand, I know where this came from, that's all I'm trying to,
Okay, so maybe it says that in this, which statutes,
would be,
go ahead.
no, go ahead, that's all right.
Which statutes and how do we know that they apply to the town charter?
Well, the town has adopted, various, you can change this, it'll be fine, I don't think the police chief or I are gonna have any disagreement on it, if you wanna make the language consistent.
It should be.
I would take that last thing here and just change the wording. Like, the chief of the police department, or the chief of the police department, shall have full and absolute authority in administration of the police department, shall make all rules and regulations for its operation, shall report to the town administrator from time to time as the administrator may require, and shall annually report to the town the condition of the department and his recommendations thereon. In expenditure, the amount of money, the chief of the police department shall be subject to further limitations of the town may from time to time prescribe.
Yeah, I would pull full and absolute out, but that's just me.
Where's Fulton?
Madam Chairlady,
Yes,
Oh.
Mr. Mulvey,
Oh, I agree. I don't think.
if I might.
please, because
speaking-
you were in the discussions of this, so.
Speaking as a private individual,
Okay.
but I was a member of the Charter Commission, I'd urge a great deal of caution approaching this one. This was a very, very heavy discussion over a number of meetings on this particular subject. Briefly put, it came down to who appointed who, we're talking police and fire, who had appointment authority, how discharge was handled in the language. There were a number of issues. Of course, as the administrator said, much of it comes down on a day-to-day basis, and the charter, it falls on the administrator. This was, after much, much discussion, drafted, and I don't think I'm taking liberties with this, by the police chief and the fire chief, and they finally, this language is agreed. Much of the language, as I understand it, gets rid of some of the problems that existed between the management of the two departments. And much of the language before you now, that was drafted by those two department heads, is based on civil service law. So if you start to interpret it as civilians, you might find you don't have the background. I would suggest that before you would try to play with this, that you would talk with the administrator and the fire chief and the police chief who actually drafted it in compliance with the law that the town has adopted. Thank you.
Say something?
Sure, Ryan.
Listening to the discussion, I feel that a lot of us like the language in the fire department thing quite a bit better. It's a little more plain, it puts the procedures in a little bit better order. Now, if we were totally in favor of that one, we could cut and paste that one up to the police and change everything that says fire to police. However, I don't think the regulations work that way.
Yeah.
And Tom's shaking his head all over, and I know it doesn't. There's different regulations for police, that's why it's written different. This came from two professional people, from two different sources. Your fire chief looked up the fire chief books, the police chief looked up his police.
This is this is a compromise between going to a full, strong chief statute, which takes the authority of appointment away from the administrator, and it puts it back in the hands of the select board, which is not what the charter intended to have happen, regardless of who's sitting in the administrator's seat.
Right.
The concern, it's not perfect language, but it comes from the statutory piece. The fire chief's statutory language is much older.
That's what I'm saying.
The police statutory language is fairly newer. I don't know what newer means, but it's, the issue that has been of concern to the administrator looking ahead is full and absolute. That is not something that I think, but it comes out of the statute and they currently work under that. This just clarifies and codifies the way we do business now. Neither the fire chief nor the police chief, under the other provisions of the charter, are going to be empowered to do anything more than they currently do.
If I may, George, you want to say?
Just briefly, we have an organization chart that, I mean, public safety may have other implications, as far as their reporting requirement to the town administrator.
Correct.
But
Where is it?
It's in the
it's
beginning of your
at the very
budget book.
beginning of the budget book,
Budget
actually.
book.
Actually, I don't see the DNR line going north. It might have been, I'm sure it's meant to be there, but basically,
Well, DNR comes, if it comes across.
I'm kidding. I'm just, I can't actually see the vertical line.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Anyway,
There.
yeah, they're meant to go as three, I guess. No, I guess each one
Yeah.
individually reports to the town administrator, so. that is a bit of a safety valve. I don't think it, you know,
Yeah, I think
I'm
it's-
not making light of this, I'm just,
No.
This is important.
yeah.
I think there's language that I would change, there's language that the police chief would change, there's language that the fire chief would change in a perfect world. This was something that we all concurred with, it came from the statute, it puts the charter as the lead document that everybody has to work by. This comes into the charter, and it's really not different than how we're working now, because we have the statutory language going back to the 30s on the fire, in the 60s, or in the 60s, I guess, with the police. So we're just codifying. It took, I want you to answer to me for everything. I'm not gonna answer to you, Administrator, on anything. And this just kind of cleaned it up, and we're all very comfortable, if not satisfied with it.
So there's a whole different set of law books for police versus fire.
Right.
And that's where these things are coming.
Correct.
It's not just the personality of the guys that wrote it.
It has nothing to do with the personality of the current incumbents.
Great.
So if they were to make if the police or fire or chief were to make a change in the department, would they have to notify you, or would they have to ask you?
On rules and regulations, the police department has to bring it to me. If I don't act on it within 30 days, he has the authority, he or she has the authority
Okay.
to make the change. The fire department has a little bit more authority under the statute relative to rules and regs of the department. They don't necessarily have to come to me. They do,
Okay.
as a matter of course. And when I say me, I mean the position.
Right. Do we know that this happens in other towns? Do we, have we looked at all?
Different towns are different. They're all different. Some are civil service strictly, and they follow the statutory language completely. Other towns, it's where there's a manager, a strong manager, it's directly to the administrator on everything, with the exception of the day-to-day operational, and this is pretty much all this is saying, is their day-to-day operational piece is left to them, as it should be, that it's a different expertise, and a different science, if you will, as to what they have to do. I get your point, and I appreciate it, but I think it's gonna be okay. I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So
She
when,
makes an excellent point.
She does. I would leave it be.
however, last week in our discussion, the last sentence in the fire department, I think, I have a note anyway that makes me believe that that's something that when he was here talking about it, I have a note that it needs to be in the police department
With-
section.
Right, but
Expenditure of
in the
money, the chief
expenditure
of the
of
police
money.
department shall be subject to such further limitations as the town may from time to time prescribe.
Yeah,
oh, okay, that's fine.
Right.
so are we comfortable with recommending that change as well as changing the word firemen to firefighters?
Well, actually, in the charter, there is a section in the charter, definitions, there's a section gender. Words importing the singular number may be extended and applied to several persons or things. Words importing the plural number may be include the singular, and words importing the masculine gender shall include the feminine gender. Because select men,
Yeah,
Well,
but we can make a point, but
I was a selectman.
yeah.
so, given the other changes we're recommending, is it worth leaving this as firemen or changing it to something else?
Just personally, I prefer to see firefighter, just because I think it's more often, it's used in regular, lexicon right now, yeah.
Yeah.
But, we'll survive as a town if we have
Well,
firemen.
logistic, if we try to make too many changes to
Yeah.
the motion,
Yeah.
it becomes difficult. So we
Okay.
have to prioritize, just as the charter review had to prioritize the things that they were gonna do and not do. I think,
I think that's a,
I think if
Unlike
this
the
were
other
the first time
typos?
we were gonna talk about this and they could have revoted some of these and she
Yeah.
cleaned up the language, I would say yes, let's
Yeah.
do it, but,
compared to the other two typos that really need to be cleaned up.
well, actually, I don't think one of them does. In the page 76, in that first paragraph where it has residents within Barnstable, Bristol, or Plymouth County with 1 year, that's what's in the charter now. And then the new paragraph where it's broken into 2 paragraphs, it doesn't list those, it just says, when appointed shall establish primary residence in the town of Bourne within 1 year after the date of appointment, provided, however, that the Board of Selectmen may, by simple majority, vote the selectmen in office at the time of appointment, extend the time for establishing residence or otherwise. So all those other counties and all that stuff is not in the new wording, so we don't need
Okay.
to put that. We don't
Right.
need to make that
Right.
change. Because it's not in the new wording. They took all that rigmarole out. So I've got the revert the wording in 2.9. I've got disability greater than 10 business days in section 4.4. On F, we have which,
And 4.6.
4.6F, we're gonna change the wording to issues, all issues and problems that they need to address. For F7, I'm gonna send this out to a draft, so people can look at it, please, to make sure I catch it all. Do we wanna add that wording of the last sentence of, to 5.7, the police department?
Madam Chair, the board can do, committee can do what it pleases, of course. I would recommend you leave it as was presented.
I mean, he can't, by other rules and regulations, he can't spend more than what his budget is that
Correct.
correct? So we
Yeah.
don't need to
Yeah.
put that in there, right?
Right.
He doesn't have a blank check, in other words.
I mean, no, we don't say that about any other department head.
The next charter
I
committee
would-
can tackle it.
Jim, do you have a question?
Yes, I have. If you are, as I think I perceive it, suggesting that some of the wording be changed, when the town meeting is in order and it comes before you for a positive motion, if you make a how do you think you can change the wording now without an amendment on a motion?
We're going to discuss this with town council, what the format of the
All right.
motion, and whether we can make a positive motion that makes changes in wording. So we are going to work on that, once we figure out what we want to recommend.
Yeah, because as I see it, you have to either pass on a positive motion, let the motion come from the floor, and then get into a debate, or vote a positive on what the wording is, and then if you don't agree or someone doesn't, then it's an amendment to it, and it gets messy.
I think you'd make
Particularly
a
in a
motion and you'd
complicated article.
amend the motion. We recommend this article as amended and give the amendments then.
It has to be made and voted,
Yeah, well-
seconded before it can be amended.
Yeah,
Can we,
No, you can make a motion and then you get a second, for the motion that's amended. In other words, I sit and I say, I make this and I amend it as follows, and then somebody on the committee can say, I second that.
We'll work with Bob Troy
You
to
could do a
do
main
Yeah,
motion. and
I think we
amend it.
need to, I think what we need to do tonight is to vote what we recommend in terms of the charter. And then the town council will draft the motion, and then we will take a final vote on Monday night in terms of the logistics of the motions that have to be done. And that'll be part of that discussion on Wednesday afternoon, which I did not post a meeting for, so if you haven't told me you were coming.
Yeah,
Don't come.
Or,
Don't have a
I
quorum.
would like to
Never
come.
read
yeah,
Renegade.
don't have a quorum. If you come and then there's too many people, someone's gonna have to leave.
I might wanna come. I didn't know when it was, I forgot. Can I ask a question about this, the residency requirement thing?
Okay, we'll go back to that.
I actually liked it the way it was. I have no idea why anybody would wanna, have the town administrator live within Bourne, where everybody will be knocking at his door for everything, poor guy. I thought the way that we had it in the previous was at least not as restrictive.
Well, I think what this does, it says that they'll establish their residency in the town of Bourne within 1 year after appointment.
Right.
However, the Board of Selectmen by simple majority
Gonna
of
waive
the
it.
selectmen in office at the time of the appointment extend the time for re-establishing residence or otherwise allow the town administrator to reside elsewhere. So if he says, well, I don't wanna live in the town of Bourne, they can say, okay, you don't have to live in the town of Bourne, and it's done, and it's permanent. Once a residency exemption is granted to the specific administrator, it may not be rescinded in future contracts with that administrator. So it simplifies it, I mean,
What's the difference between then, if they can live outside in other counties or wherever? I don't know what the
Yeah,
problem
those
was.
3 counties, that's,
That was a,
Kind of
that was a
ridiculous.
So that's
compromise back
restricted.
then, as I
Yeah, it
remember, it
was.
was
Which-
appreciated at the time.
So you think this is less restrictive?
It can be if the
So-
next administrator, because the current administrator is exempt, if the next administrator who is hired lives in Franklin,
Right.
and the Board of Selectmen at the time really want this town administrator from Franklin, they can waive the residency requirement.
Because I think
they'll,
you
they'll need to do a supermajority to hire, but then a simple majority to
right.
waive the
And-
right.
And that's it forever for that
And-
person.
Yeah,
I think it
It's-
definitely does put a damper on people wanting to come here if they have to live in the town of Bourne, that's all. I think.
Well, we have residency requirements in a lot of places, but, I mean, they really, you can do whatever, they can do really what they want.
Yeah,
I mean,
as,
there's a
as
lot
I
of-
explained to the charter committee, fewer and fewer towns are requiring a residency requirement.
Yeah, I,
Situate, the administrator lives in Conway, Mass. The former administrator, either in Wellfleet or Truro, lived in Albany. The administrator in Wareham was in Rhode Island and has moved to North Attleboro. So, I mean, it's becoming less and less. It's a long way to Albany, by the way, from Wellfleet, but,
I think it's pretty common, I mean, the superintendent of schools is required to live in the town of Bourne unless exempted from the
Yeah.
school committee. I mean, it's a pretty common requirement, and then
it's,
some people feel that, yes, people might be knocking on your door, but other people feel that if the town administrator is a resident of the town of Bourne and pays the same taxes as the town of Bourne and has the same interests in the town of Bourne, that they'd be more invested in the community. I'm not sure that I would necessarily agree with that, but some people feel that way. And then it's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide, we don't think it's necessary in this situation, or we do. And it's pretty common, I think.
it's becoming,
the level of professionalism, you know, that you want to hire a
Yeah,
person.
you're handcuffing yourself.
That's right. You don't want to, I mean, I used to believe that too. I used to think, you know, the skin in the game is that the person at least be a resident. That way, every decision that they make is, you know, self-interested, but it's in the interest of everybody. But I think that because of the level of professionalism required in the first place, I think that person has to overcome that, you know, during the hiring process, not worry about it afterward. If they make their case that they will overcome any distance, whether it's right around the corner and not a town resident, or, you know, 50, 60, 70 miles away, if they, that should be addressed during the hiring process. In other words, how will that person overcome that distance and still come in to work fully charged? And if that case is made, then I think, you know,
Then you give
the
them
hiring people should
exemption,
go ahead
then
and-
you
yeah.
do that.
And I think if, when the time comes for us to hire another town administrator, if we should lose our preferred candidate because of this, it'll get changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if we are so foolish as to keep it in the charter and then hold firm to it in the contract negotiations for your best candidate, then shame on us.
Right.
And a lot of it will be how it's, how the position is advertised.
Yeah.
You know, if it's advertised as, you know, residency, town residency is referred, but exemptions are available, then you're not gonna have people not apply. If you advertise it as you must be a town resident, you'll have people self-select out before you even start.
Correct, yeah.
That's right.
How does this apply to other employees of the town? Your
Not
police,
at all.
fire, DPW, and so forth?
Not at all.
Not at all, so they can live,
Civil service
Go down
has
the
some
street.
requirements, but
Yeah.
they're not strictly enforced by some
Many of them do.
departments.
so it's not like we're picking on Tom, it's
No.
applies to everybody.
Well, your police, fire chief doesn't live in town, your police chief does, but he's, many police officers live in town, many firefighters don't. Many police, so
Okay, so it's all up in.
many
it's
department
not
heads,
just you
yeah,
we're
many
talking about.
department heads do not live in
Right.
town. I would venture to say 50% of the department heads
Okay,
don't live in town.
That's the point I wanted to make. We seem to get bogged down with the town administrator, but it applies all over.
So in this particular case, the Charter Review Committee has recommended this change. And so either we go along with the change that they have recommended, or we try to propose something different, or
I would
say.
just have no residency, I mean, you know.
Right, but that would be a whole I mean, that wouldn't be reverting to what we already have, it would be,
Right.
it would be proposing a whole nother thing. So I would suggest that if we're okay with the wording as it is, that we let this go because there's a thing and address it next time if we want to get it removed.
All right,
That's not really on the table, I think, this time.
I think you should leave it be.
okay, I
Yeah.
agree.
And at least they,
It's an important point, because I think you could lose a good person whose kids were in school in another town and did not want to move them and had a house and, you know.
And I think that that's why you can get it granted. The big thing that they wanted to do was to make sure that the residency exemption, once it's granted, cannot be
Yes,
rescinded. And
absolutely.
I think
Right,
that,
I know.
I think that is a really good,
That's
I think that's a really
advantage.
positive
Yeah.
change. That you don't have a change in the Board of Selectmen that changes the employment conditions, or it becomes a way of changing it, so the person,
Okay.
backdoor way to get someone to leave. So I think,
I'm
yeah.
glad we heard that, because it's been on my mind a little.
So we've got a sum total of 3 changes we're gonna recommend. We've got the removal of section 2.9, the typo on page 77, changing the word is, and then section 4.6, rewording that sentence.
yes.
Yeah, functionally, I think 3, I mean, do you think we can suggest 3 changes in one article, and that would be the limit? Because I think we're getting to the point where this would have to be tabled if you, and it'd be confusing to town meeting, I think.
One's a typo, the other one was some rewording that's,
And I think part of it is, if we can have some discussion with the town council about if our amendments can be in the motion book, included that these are the amendments, and they've done that before when amendments are required. They've included the amendment in so that people reading a town meeting can have it before them and not trying to hear something and not exactly know what it is. One of the, this is kind of an aside thing, but we don't have any comments, verbal comments in the handbook. And I was thinking that perhaps if people wanted to make written comments, that we could maybe put them in with the motions. In other words, if we put all our votes in with the motions, then that would be something, just sort of our warrant tracker. I don't know if it creates too much of a burden for town hall if we were to try to make any comments or.
We already printed the book.
The question, I'm not sure it creates that much of a burden to run a few more copies, okay? I mean, if we're just making copies, it's copies if they're typed in. The question that I asked the chair is, are you making the recommendations too complicated at that point with?
Yeah, I think we'll just leave it and hope that next year, we can get our act together a little bit earlier for the.
No, we've done it in
Yeah.
past times, it sort of overcame us this time, I think.
Yeah, I think a last-minute snowstorm kind of really threw the things in a
Let's
muck.
blame it on the snowstorm. Yeah.
Well, it did really knock,
It
it
really
really knocked two and a half or 2 weeks out, 3 weeks
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Well, especially that late one, because as Wes said, that they were coming to that meeting to talk about some of
That
these
was the
things, and
full
some of these
meeting.
things would have been actually voted as changes
And they would
by
have made,
them and would have been in the book
Yeah.
as changes, as opposed to having to be explained. And I think that's, okay, so,
We have a motion?
So, how about if we have a vote on, are we in agreement with these recommended changes? So that at least town council knows we all agree on it, then we have the formal vote Monday night, once we have the actual motion.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
in other words, we're voting to send this for, our
Right.
recommendation to the
Yeah, I
town
think we
council
would,
to review for final approval.
Second,
Done.
Go, Bill.
we might need to
Not
have
a,
that,
not a word.
The motion man.
That'll conclude the issue.
That's it.
To the, Cody School.
So you're gonna tell me?
Yeah, once I get it from
okay,
Bob.
so, Bill has moved and Michelle has seconded, right?
right?
You have the motion, do you wanna read it back? No?
No.
Recommend approval, to recommend approval of the article with the changes to sections, deleting section 2.9, typo in section 4.4,
Yes.
and rewording of section 4.6, with the, final vote of the finance committee on the motions proposed by town council next. Right,
Right, on Monday night.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed, abstention? Okay, very good, good discussion.
I got some creative writing to do now,
Yeah.
in 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so, that's, I think that's the last thing we can, have a, conservation restriction. We don't have that much. We're gonna hold on that.
Right.
So the moderator requested that the comments at the town meeting be, limited to 3 minutes for normal articles and 5 minutes for the budget.
Okay.
Wow.
I think that, I would say when possible, that there needs to be some leeway, cause I'd have to talk really fast.
Like Article 1, I
Sounds
gotta
like he
read the
wants to
whole
do it in
page
one night.
more.
Right, and so I think for some articles, it's clear that if you don't need to make a lot of comment, don't make a lot of comment. If, I don't know what's going to, I don't know if the CPC is depending on you to do the whole explanation of everything, or
No.
whether they're gonna do their own explanation, then, you know.
I'm presenting it as the block presentation.
Okay,
And if they want to come up and say something,
right, so, but
and that's what I understand at this
that
point.
you're doing the presentation, and they're only going to answer questions, so I think that's gonna take a little bit more than 3 minutes, so I think that there are some articles that are gonna require that, and
I thought some of them gave extraordinarily great presentations to us, so I thought that meant that we had all the CCC
It'll
articles.
only be if they need an explanation.
I thought they were great presenters.
Okay, so I think the next thing on the agenda was essential and contingent articles. So,
Okay.
we usually haven't done this before we go into the pre-town meeting, but I would like to have it for the pre-town meeting. We don't need to do the special town meeting, because that's in and of itself, so. 1 through 9, 11. Are the CPA things essential? No, no. Do you need to have a 16? Unissued debt?
No.
It's not essential. Is anything contingent on that?
No.
Okay.
17,
Well, that's.
That's 17 and 8 are
Yeah,
contingent.
so,
Right.
yeah, so 8 is contingent on 17, so that'll be in the essentials automatically, more because it's,
11, 17, 8 is contingent on 17, okay.
11, so we need another one. 1 to 9, 11, and 17, those are the essentials?
Right.
Oh, we get to pay the bill.
So I move that those be the essential articles and that Article 8 is contingent on Article 17.
Question? Once it's seconded?
So it's moved.
Second.
It's not a budgetary item, but should Article 27 be essential if we're gonna close on the sale of that building? On Cody, it's essential that this get done. I'm not sure it's essential to the functioning of the, come on. A little slack.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm trying.
Nice try.
Trying.
We've tried that before and it didn't
I
fly.
know, I'm just trying. It's important that that be done.
Important doesn't equal essential.
Will be to next year's free cash.
Well, we didn't count it as received, so that's good. Okay, so we have a motion for 1 to 9, 11, and 17 is essential, and Article 8 is contingent on 17, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay.
It's contingent on.
I just
We
did
don't have any
Oh, okay.
minutes, we don't have any minutes. Because they weren't available for replay yet, so, future meetings, topics. Before the annual town meeting, we have quite a few articles to vote, actually. Do you think 6:15 is enough time, or do you think we need 6? 6?
We've only got 5 to vote.
Yeah, but we haven't really discussed some of those 5, so let's do 6, well, post it for 6, and we should be well underway by 6:15 at the latest, so if you have to be a little bit late, it's okay, but let's try it for 6 PM. And,
Usual place?
yes, it's been
Professional?
reserved. The professional library at the high school has been reserved. Before a future meetings schedule, topics and schedule, what about our post-town meeting discussion? In the past couple of years, we've done that before the election, so that current people were there. I don't know if that's gonna work this year, or if we just are gonna,
I can't
okay.
tell. I can't
Okay.
tell.
So, well, we'll talk to the chair of the Board of Selectmen, see what he wants to do.
All right.
Okay. Town administrator comment?
None this evening, Madam Chair.
Finance committee comment? Brief update on school building committee. The new survey is up, so if you're interested
Oh,
in
yeah,
looking
that's
at the
right.
numbers on the different options that they have now, including some tax impacts, I suggest you go to the Town of Bourne website, School Building Committee, and there's a link to the survey, I'm pretty sure at that point.
Yep, Dick already took it.
Survey monkey.
Verbal comments by April 30th, the earlier you can do it, the better. Is the Easter that I celebrate this Sunday, so I would like to be done by Saturday. Is that public comment? Yes?
And the only other comment, on Wednesday, you'll have about an hour for the pre-town meeting, because selectmen have a posted executive session at 4.
Okay with me.
That'll move things along.
Like always, or where is it?
Yes,
Yeah. Wednesday, what time?
3
It's at 3
o'clock.
o'clock. I sent you an email about it.
Wednesday?
Yeah. I sent you.
No, yeah, no.
It's just people.
Any public comment? Mr. Baldy?
If I might, thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and speaking as an individual just for the moment. These are observations. I recognize the Finance Committee is a very important and hardworking committee, but it has come up quite a few times before, and it has come up fairly recently again. And the basic question is, why is the Finance Committee engaged in articles or town business that have no financial ramifications? And that question has been out there for some time, and I've heard it again recently, that your work should be confined to those issues which have a bearing on the finances of the town. The case in point tonight, if, in looking at any one article that has been submitted by another committee and recommended, and this committee then takes it on itself to work legitimately with the administrator and with the moderator and the town council to change that wording that has been recommended by another committee after a good amount of reflection, particularly if you recommend changes that change in any way whatsoever the intent and meaning of what that subcommittee or committee has recommended, you are opening the door then to these committees saying, hey, what are we doing? We might just as well be some kind of a subcommittee and come in and report to the FinCom, because they take our work and change it as they see fit. And it could impact committees' thinking in that way. So I put these issues out because they are out there, and there is some legitimacy to the thinking. But thank you for the opportunity to express myself.
I would say, Jim, that the charter under section 7.4, Finance Committee action, says that the Finance Committee will indicate its support or opposition to the proposed budget or any sections thereof, and its vote by roll call on all warrant articles.
That's right.
And it has been the process at the town meeting for the Finance Committee to make the motion. So without changing this section, in which case we are to make a comment on all warrant articles.
That is exactly to the part of the charter I am referring to, and it is not a recent thing that has come forth. It's been spoken of among the public for quite some time, and again fairly recently, that your work should be confined to that which has a fiscal or financial impact on the town. Perhaps it should be a town government committee that takes care of these other operations of the town, which are strictly administrative or non-financial, rather than the broad brush which your committee is painted with. Thank you.
I just want to say, anybody in town meeting can stand up and make a motion to change something.
Right.
It's not just the Finance Committee that can do that. And I also think that the Finance Committee, as the way it was constructed early on, way before I even got here, always was to be like an advisory to the town meeting, to discuss all the parameters of the meeting, all the different articles. I don't see it's any problem I think it's great to have a body that actually sits and discusses this stuff. Other than that, you just come in cold turkey to the meeting, and you have no idea what's going on. So I would, I don't hear that kind of stuff. I hear a lot of good stuff about the finance committee. I do. People ask me, what does the finance committee think? They wanna know, you know, so.
And I'd just add that we don't take it lightly when we consider another committee's work. And it is not very frequently that we change anybody else's work. And I think most specifically of the bylaw committee, and look at the seemingly hundreds of changes that have come through over the last several years. But when we have had a change, there's been pretty vigorous and open discussion with that committee. And I think we had that discussion last week with Wes as the chair of the charter committee. So if the process is broken, then, you know, maybe more people would come out and speak to that in charter review committees, or would come to the finance committee meetings and tell us we're all wrong. But, you know, we don't hear, quite frankly, a lot of comment from the public. At least I certainly don't. I can count on two hands the number of times somebody, when I've been out and about, has spoken to me specifically about finance committee work. Frankly, I think there's a lot of apathy, and plenty of people are glad that we're doing the job.
I think also that in support of that, as it was said a few minutes earlier, as Wes said when he was here, had we not had that break in things, this, again, we discussed that, again, would have been discussed at that particular point when everybody was working together at that point, because he came here asking our opinion and presenting, and so I think because of the timelines and everything, it just got so compacted, you didn't have that situation at the time to react. And a lot of that would have been taken care of right then, because he did say, I'd known, realized, you know, a couple of things already they talked about. We missed it, because it's like you look at things and you read over and over and over, and you don't always
Right.
see the pieces that are there.
And I think we did hear last week some discussion about, well, we shouldn't be reviewing CPA articles because that's not financial in nature. Those are tax dollars that are getting spent, so why would we not be taking a look at that? Granted, they're not part of the general operating budget, but they are certainly a direct impact, either because it's coming from those real estate sales taxes, but more importantly, it is money that takes the place of real estate taxes that we pay that would otherwise have to be spent on a lot of these items. So at the end of the day, to me, it all comes down to, it's tax dollars coming out of our pockets. Why would we not vet those articles?
Okay, thank you for your comment, though. Okay, if there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Everywhere.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? No, very good.
I will.
Okay.
Time. Tie goes to you.
We're not a committee to discuss it.
Was the what article?
What's the tax title revolving?